Hello, my name is Scott Lane and welcome to this Speeki Webinar Series. For those of you that have joined our webinar series before, the Speeki Webinar is designed for a 30-minute topic, and we will cover as much as we can within that 30-minute period. If you haven't joined before, we welcome you to the webinar series, and if you have joined previously, welcome back. Today's topic is a 30-minute review on what is known as AI governance. Many of you have probably heard about the concept of AI governance, as it has become a hot topic in both boardrooms and at executive meetings around how organizations should deal with the AI influx and what sort of controls should be put in place in organizations. So this is a growing interest to many companies. In the 30-minute period, we will try and cover as much as we can to give you an overview of what AI governance really covers, what it intends to cover, some of the questions that having an AI governance program will answer. Then we'll also look at some of the solutions for companies to begin the development of an AI governance program. With the timing being only 30 minutes, it is sometimes challenging to answer questions within that period. However, feel free to ask those questions in the chat, and I will try and answer them towards the end of the webinar. And if I don't get a chance, then I will respond offline. So please feel free to ask those questions. Now, as we go through this topic, keep in mind that given a 30-minute period is quite a lot of material to get through, and it could be the subject of a significantly longer session, and it certainly warrants that. So I'm going to cover as much as I can, but keep in mind that this is very much an overview and an introductory session of what's included in AI governance. So let's just talk for briefly about what this AI governance concept really means. One of the challenges is defining what exactly do we mean by AI governance. So firstly, I like to think of it as the marks in red on this page. Firstly, it's a framework. It's a strategic framework by which a company is going to develop so that it enables AI systems to be rolled out in the organization. Rolled out in a way whether you're developing AI systems or whether you're simply deploying them, something that you have built, or simply enabling ChatGPT for your employees. And how to manage those AI systems within the company. So that framework is really what this governance model is designed for. And again, it could be that your organization is building AI models. It could be that you have technology like Speeki, where we're building in AI systems. Or it could be that you are simply using ChatGPT and other systems within your company. Either way, the framework includes both options. Now, of course, the policies and procedures and rules that make up that framework is what you need to build and what you need to decide. And the concept of having an AI governance framework is that a lot of the questions that you might have around AI are answered in the governance model. So you shouldn't have open questions because they should be answered in the governance model. Now, as you go through governance models, you will determine some of the questions that your organization needs to address. I'm going to cover 10 of those in a minute, which are the ones that we're addressing in our organization, and I'll use that as an example for this system. Now, why do we care about having an AI governance model? Well, this should be a fairly obvious answer, but a lot of organizations haven't quite got around to this yet. And so they're still trying to working out what this AI piece is and how they address it. And of course, everything's moving pretty quickly. So everyone is kind of getting their head around what this actually means. But the big point that I'd like to stress is the reason we're building a governance framework is not to build checklists or to look at even the chance of getting a certification or something. We're doing it because, frankly, this is a huge technology shift in most organizations, and it needs to have some controls around it, not just because it's large and complex and is transformative, but because it's AI. And so by its nature, it needs to have some degree of controls. So ordinarily, you would have some sort of system around a large transformation, but in the AI sense, it's even more important because of the nature of AI itself. So that's the real reason why we're implementing this governance model. It's simply it's a control feature. The second reason is very much a business focused reason, which in our view, you really need to have effective governance to speed things up. Effective governance not only puts in place the controls, but it's frankly a business imperative. And a good governance structure can deal with a crisis. A good governance structure can execute quickly. A good governance structure has documentation. A good governance structure can be used as a defensive mechanism. And frankly, a good governance structure just makes sense so that you don't have to answer the same question 10 times over from staff. And you can publish this as part of a governance framework, a set of policies and procedures. So it should be, frankly, pretty obvious why we care about building these governance frameworks. Some people that I've met with and spoken with have said, this sounds all a little bit unnecessary and, a lot of paperwork and a lot of documents. And what I hope that you will see as you go through this webinar and your own governance models, actually it's a lot more than that. And in fact, the controls around AI can be quite technical and will require quite a bit of understanding and nuance. So I've put together 10 questions as to what I think the governance model should answer. And I'll go through these very quickly in the interest of time, but the sort of questions that are asked and your governance model should answer is who's accountable for the AI decisions and outcomes? So if we build AI models in the company, then you've got to define the roles and responsibilities around that. So who is responsible for these issues? Who's responsible for the decisions that the AI might execute in the business? So thinking about that roles and responsibilities is something that we'll cover a little bit later. But accountability, responsibility has to be set out in this governance model. Secondly, there are some AI use cases which may or may not be acceptable. They may be acceptable by law, but they may not be something that meets, for example, your ethics policy. So some use cases of AI may be prohibited or not. So the governance framework is to define how are you going to be using AI in your organization? What are those particular use cases? And to what extent might they be restricted? Restricted at law or restricted under ethics or other considerations your company has? So understanding those ethical boundaries, that risk tolerance that your organization has to AI, and understanding what those structures are and making sure that those use cases apply within the boundaries that you draw. Similarly to that, we know that AI can potentially create or be used in bias, or it could be unfairly discriminatory against groups. That may or may not be part of the use case, but it is absolutely reasonable that your governance model addresses that fairness, bias, and discriminatory. So you need to work out in the governance model, how are you going to address the elements of detecting, measuring, and mitigating those risks when throughout that life cycle of developing AI or training AI, deploying, and the life cycle of potentially upgrading or removing it, you address some of these fairness issues. Now, we've seen a lot of litigation already in relation to AI and the data which has been used to train those models. Now, as you think about using the existing models, you're probably relatively safe from that litigious action. But if you are developing your own models in your organization, for example, you're using data in your organization to train your AI model to do something, you may have to think through the whole data question. So where is the data? Who owns the data? What is confidential in the data? What might be privileged data? What data might be owned by other parties? So there's a whole intellectual property dialogue to be had. These are real issues and they have not yet been fully resolved in the courts. So it is very reasonable for you to think through that data training model and where it's coming from. Now, there might be an assumption that if you're using in-house data, that is okay. That obviously is an assumption that you should challenge. Data that sits in your company may not be completely owned by you, but may be owned by other parties. So you need to be thinking through how to do that. Finally, number 5 is about validation. It's relatively easy to build some AI models and to train the data and the model. What's more challenging is the validation process. So the validation process is really about the testing protocols. How do we know that the AI is acting correctly, that's responding correctly? The methodology around that validation is really key. So the governance model needs to set out, well, who's responsible for that model and who is doing that model, and what are the tools that we're using in order to set out that testing, that benchmarking, that validation exercise. So whilst training AI models is one element, the second element is that validation of that information and then producing that into a particular model. So that accuracy, reliability piece is something that needs to be scoped out. Other questions that boards and executives are asking is, well, what happens if the AI systems fail? I mean, if it fails or it produces harmful effects, what do we do? How do we turn off the AI system? How do we perhaps reduce it down from being, an agentic model into a generative model? What do we do if it starts to give answers that are incorrect or that are potentially outside what we've defined as being valid? Having those incident response procedures and knowing how to react, having the tools to be able to access the system and make changes and potentially turn it off or adjust it are also things that you'll need to think through. So that governance model is going to have to think through where are we using AI in the company, what those use cases are, and what do we do when it fails? Now, the next question that everyone asks is, well, how do we know that when AI makes a decision or it gives an answer or it gives some sort of response to a prompt, how do we know that it's correct? And frankly, when our customers ask us, how did this answer get prepared? What is our answer? How do we come back with some level of transparency and be able to explain how our AI produced this particular answer? So that's a tooling question and it's a technical question, but it's also a strategic question. The extent to which you're going to publish and be transparent about how that information was collected and how the AI engine processed that information in order to get to a response. So having that governance model will answer that question. How do we ensure both the transparency and explain the responses? Now, everyone in organizations right now is playing with AI. Now, some organizations will have a structure that says we only use this particular AI. Some will be more flexible. Some companies might allow you to download DeepSeek. They might allow you to use the retail ChatGPT. They might have a Copilot instance. The question is, what's our position on that? Is it something that we should allow people to do whatever they want, or is it going to be controlled? And is it only this AI and only in these circumstances? And is it only segregated so it's not passing data out back to the the ChatGPTs or open AIs of the world. So again, a governance model has to set out what the rules are. So who is going allowed to run these models? How do you access them? What are the rules? How do we track it? And essentially the structure around how employees might use AI themselves. There are a number of regulations already popping up around the world on AI. Some of them are in Europe, and we've seen others in draft locations around the world. So we will see more legislation popping up in this area. Now, most of that legislation right now is based on bias and discriminatory practices, which is understandable. And there are certain use cases where that AI is restricted. So, for example, loan documentation or loan approvals, etc. So there are a number of areas where it is restricted. Medical is an example. There are other areas which is kind of open. The short answer is there is going to be a lot more regulation going forward. So if you are a company which is running these models around the world, you're going to have to think through how do we have a governance system that identifies all of those laws, identifies what's required, complies with them in a way that doesn't really stretch the organization from a capacity perspective. Now, the final piece is looking at the actual governance program itself. How do we know that the system that we've designed is actually working and functioning correctly? And how have we tested to make sure that we've got the right controls, the right tools, the right roles, responsibilities, that we're monitoring our AI system and that it is actually accurate? So these are the sorts of questions that I think boards and executives are asking the teams and many on the call to say, well, look, we kind of need answers to these questions and we need to document it. And that is precisely what that governance model is. That's the point of what it's trying to address. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I think this is particularly important. I'm going to cover 5 of them. There are many others. In fact, I asked a LLM today what the LLM thought about why it's important, and I kind of got about 50, but these are the top 5 that I think is really key. The first is purely regulatory. Purely regulatory. There is going to be an increased focus on laws. There are a lot more regulations. So you kind of got to have an AI regulatory system in place and a compliance system around AI. So unfortunately, we've got to add it to our list of all the things that we need to address, from bribery and corruption to whistleblowing to fraud to money laundering to sanctions to human rights and diversity and all these other things. We've now got to put AI into the mix. So whilst we are excited about the use of AI in organizations, we now need to build the structure around it. So the regulatory environment is here already, and it will definitely increase. My gut feeling is that you'll see 5 to 10 times the amount of legislation around the world that what we have currently. And so that will be a new development for you. The second piece is risk mitigation. We really need to do this AI model because it does create risks. Now, there may be legal risks, reputational risks. There may be risks around embarrassment or quality control risks if our AI engine does something, risks around potentially employees using AI and sending out client data in a prompt, or there's a bunch of areas where risk could arise. I think we're still working out exactly what all those risk areas are, but there are some obvious ones that I've mentioned that I think already exist now and should be managed. So there's a risk reason to do it. There's also a business continuity reason. And what that means is, as we build software and companies build software, we are going to be embedding AI quite strongly into that software. And Speeki is an example of that. So what's going through my head when we build software is if we do encounter concerns about the AI potentially going rogue, how do we turn it off? And if we turn it off, how do we keep a system functioning with perhaps a downgraded capacity or functionality? So companies need to think through how they do this, because once they start building AI into the systems, there is a business continuity issue. If it goes rogue, how do we pull it back and continue our business and have our clients use our products and services, but continue to do so with perhaps a reduced AI presence while that issue gets reined in? So there could be some operational issues, some legal issues. There's a bunch of risk issues here to kind of think through. The next is just thinking about just trust. When I look at even ourselves in making software, there is a huge reliance on us as a software producer to make sure that the systems that we build are robust and that they have the functionality they need, that are forward looking, that have got the ability to use the technology like AI when it's available. But there's an element of trust here where we need to demonstrate to our clients, just like many of you on the call need to demonstrate to your clients, how you are managing your AI risk. Because at the end of the day, it's going to impact your clients. Your clients need to trust that you have this under control. So I think that you will see, unfortunately, a barrage of requests from your customers coming to you and saying, what are you doing about AI? How are you using AI on your systems? Can we see how you're managing your governance model? So just like we saw the ridiculous amount of questionnaires being thrown around the world in human rights, environmental, carbon, and all the other areas, I think that you will see a lot more in this AI sense. So having a governance model, having that documented and saying, here's our answer, this is what we do, or here's our certification, which I'll come to, here's what we do, it's going to save you a lot of time. Build trust with your customer base. And the final area is thinking about, why a governance framework is theoretically just going to make things faster. It's going to reduce the fragmented views of AI across the company, and it's going to try and not be duplicative where we have everyone running off and doing their own thing when it comes to AI, but we'll get that in one place. Hopefully we'll reduce that inconsistency and that fragmentation. We'll get some standardized processes. We'll make it very clear. We'll pick the best options and make it clear for people. We'll add that oversight layer so that we can manage this governance model. And frankly, the organizations can embrace AI. We want them to embrace AI. We want them to do it. We want to invest in it. We want to have that competitive advantage. But obviously, we want to be able to do that in a way that is structured and not haphazard. So another big reason why I think this is important is because it'll accelerate the business adoption of AI, the use of AI, and everything that comes to it. So it's a strong proposition to embrace governance from a business perspective, an operational perspective, not necessarily purely compliance or risk management, but thinking about that operational side. That will lead to a competitive advantage. So organizations who are embracing AI, who are getting out there fast and are starting to move forward confidently with a system in place, definitely will create a competitive advantage. And that's certainly what we're doing at Speeki. And we're certainly pushing forward with our AI governance models and documenting all the systems we're doing with a view to becoming certified. So that's what I would do if I was they're the 5 reasons that I would focus on if I was building this capability in the company around AI governance. Now, if you're going to get started, there's a couple of things that I will walk you through very briefly before I close with the top 5 things. Now, if you're getting started on this AI governance model, the first thing I'd be doing is talking about what we just covered, and I'd be propagating that throughout the organization and getting some buy-in, and I'd be getting some support. I'd be talking to executives and the IT and the legal, the compliance teams and management, the board and the oversight, the audit committee. I'd be getting everyone recognizing this is important. We need to do it for all the reasons that I've just mentioned. So how do we do it? Many of you are familiar with certainly our role at Speeki, both as a software company and as an assurance company. We believe in standards. Frankly, I believe in standards for a number of reasons. Firstly, because someone has done all the work for me and I can simply read it and follow the standard. So there is a standard. It's called AI, Artificial Intelligence Management Systems. It is a management system standard. It's recent. It came out last year. It is a very clear document. It is called 42001. So many of you are familiar with other standards like bribery, 37001, or information security, 27001. This one is AI, 42001. The 001 means that it is a certifiable standard, so you can gain a certification. So the first thing I would do is I'd buy the standard. Go to iso.org, buy it, $100 or so, 200 maybe, pull down the standard, read it and go through it. I'll take you through a few key bits of it, but obviously it is a chunky document, and I would encourage you to do that. It's the first place to start. If you're going to build an AI governance model, follow the standard and the guidance. It's going to save you a huge amount of time in trying to work this stuff out yourself. Now, there's a lot of sections to the standard, and I'm not going to go through them all, but here are some things that it covers. It helps you identify a policy, roles, responsibilities, the role of the humans, the roles of the technical, making sure that the AI policies align with the other policies like information security and other access security rights, making sure that we document this stuff. Thinking about the competencies of the people that we have working on AI, meaning do we actually have the competency to know what AI is in the company so that we can actually regulate it and control it? Thinking about the AI impact, so the impact assessments. We're very familiar with privacy impact assessments or environmental impact assessments. Now we've got to think about AI impact assessments. So how is our AI going to impact the world, our customers, our stakeholders, and how can we recognize some of those issues like bias, etc. Documenting that impact, talking to our stakeholders, thinking about the effect on society, whether the engines and the use of AI in our company is going to impact society as a whole. So thinking through all of these issues, the objectives, the design, the development of AI, the deployment, the testing, the verification, all of this is covered in the standard. So it is a great shortcut to getting through this material. So I really encourage people to look at the standard. It'll help you guide through a bunch of issues. I've covered just some of them on the screen, but there is a lot of material. Now that you've seen the standard, I'm going to go through the top 5 things, the reasons why I particularly think this is the right answer. And having been advising on some of this, building our own software, deploying AI in our own software, deploying AI in our own business, but also working on our own governance model inside Speeki, I've learned a few things that I'm going to share. So firstly, the reason I like the standard is because it's the same as every other standard. It has the same 10 sections. It's a same structure. ISO standards follow the same path. The reason that's important is because if you've got people in your organization from IT security, or perhaps management or executives, they're going to be very familiar with this concept. So if you have a health and safety or a bribery certification or other certification or other standards, this standard is going to be exactly the same. The words that are used, the descriptions that are used, the definitions that are used, even the numbering of the clauses are very similar. So it means everyone's very familiar with the concept. So if you are an organization that adapts standards already, this is going to make your life a lot easier. Now, like every management standard, it follows a system. And you may have heard of this system, the Plan, Do, Check, Act. Now, these words are not actually mentioned in these standards, by the way, but they just is a way in which these standards work. So it plans out what you're going to do. You do something, so you run your AI system, you check to see that it's working, and if it's not, then you act on it and fix it. So this kind of circular motion means that you're constantly looking and reevaluating how the AI system works. Now, the reason I think it's going to be very relevant to do this for AI, because AI is not static. 2 years ago, we'd never heard of generative AI. 2 months ago, we'd never heard of agentic AI. And in 2 years' time, there's going to be something else. So this is not a static environment. This is changing. So the concept of ISO is a very good way to keep you on top of it. Thirdly, there's a long set of controls in the annex. So if you're not sure what what control you need to put in place, well, the standard tells you. So like the information security one, it gives a long list of stuff for you to do. So it's really detailed and it works really well. Fourthly, you can get certified. So if you want that badge of honor that you have a governance model and you have an AI management system in place that meets the set, well, you can get certified for it. So you can go through that certification process. So again, trust for your clients, trust in your company that it meets those AI management systems. There's a really good marketing competitive advantage. So that certification piece is strong. Not all standards are certifiable, this one is. Finally, and the fifth way, the reason why I think this is a good idea is because it's just easy. Building a governance model using these standards is the same building the governance model around bribery and corruption, same governance model about key issues that you see in the market on other topics. It's the same stuff. So that's the reason I think these are really great tools for people to use. Now that brings us to the end of this webinar series. Now there is a lot of material in here that I could have covered, and obviously I haven't. If you need further information, you're welcome to reach out to me, myself or the team, or have a look at the Speeki Academy on our website, where we have a whole academy and training platform where you can log in and see some other courses. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Speeki Webinar Series, and we look forward to seeing you in next month's webinar. Take care for now. Goodbye.